By November 1942, German troops controlled most of Stalingrad. Hitler believed victory was only days away. Then, the Soviet Union launched a massive counterattack. Within 4 days, more than 250,000 Axis soldiers were surrounded. There was no reliable escape route. There was not enough food, and the temperature was falling. Welcome back to Stalingrad, where the battle had just become a trap. This is part 2 of our Battle of Stalingrad story. If you have not seen part 1, you can still follow along, but the German supply officers would strongly recommend starting in the correct order. Follow the channel for more true history told through people, maps, and the occasional logistical disaster. Now, let us begin with Operation Uranus. Operation Uranus began on November 19, 1942. The name sounds like something chosen after every intimidating title had already been taken, but the plan itself was deadly serious. Instead of attacking the strongest German positions inside Stalingrad, Soviet forces struck the Romanian armies protecting the flanks. These units were spread across a huge front and lacked enough modern anti-tank weapons. Soviet artillery opened fire. Tanks and infantry broke through from the north. The following day, another Soviet force attacked from the south. Both groups raced westward across the frozen steppe. On November 23rd, they met near Kalach. The ring closed. Paulus asked for permission to break out. At first, an escape might still have been possible, although the army would have needed to abandon heavy equipment and move quickly. Hitler refused. He ordered the Sixth Army to remain in Stalingrad. Hermann Göring claimed that the Luftwaffe could supply the trapped army by air. This was wildly unrealistic. The Sixth Army required several hundred tons of supplies each day. The available aircraft, airfields, and weather conditions could not reliably deliver that amount. The plan required arithmetic to become extremely optimistic. Arithmetic declined. The Luftwaffe attempted the airlift, but deliveries rarely approached what the Sixth Army needed. Snow, fog, Soviet fighters, and overcrowded airfields caused heavy losses. Some containers landed in Soviet-held territory. Others contained supplies that were not immediately useful. An army waiting for food and ammunition occasionally received items such as spices or summer clothing. This was not because spices were part of a secret winter strategy. It was because a massive supply system was breaking down under pressure. Inside the pocket, fuel, medicine, and food continued to disappear. The surrounded area became known as the Stalingrad Pocket. German soldiers faced hunger, frostbite, disease, and constant Soviet attacks. Horses were slaughtered for food. Fuel became so scarce that many vehicles could no longer move. The wounded filled field hospitals with limited medicine and almost no heat. Soldiers wrapped themselves in blankets, curtains, and pieces of fabric taken from ruined buildings. Letters home became shorter and more desperate. Many understood that promises of rescue were becoming less believable every day. The Soviet troops outside the pocket also suffered terribly. This was not an easy victory waiting to happen. They still had to defeat a huge, fortified force in winter. In December, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein launched Operation Winter Storm, an attempt to reach the Sixth Army. German relief forces advanced from the southwest and came within roughly 50 kilometers of the pocket. For the trapped soldiers, rescue suddenly seemed possible. But Paulus still needed permission to break out. The order never came. Soviet resistance stopped the relief force and pushed it back. The window for escape closed. Soon, new Soviet attacks threatened the wider German position in southern Russia. Stalingrad could no longer be rescued without risking an even greater disaster. In January 1943, the Soviets launched Operation Ring, the final offensive against the pocket. German positions collapsed inward. Airfields were captured, ending most evacuation and supply flights. The pocket was divided into smaller sections. Every day brought less territory, fewer supplies, and fewer options. Paulus reported that resistance could not continue for much longer. Hitler continued demanding that the army hold its position. By this stage, the strategy was essentially, wait for something miraculous, and please do not examine the supply calculations. On January 30, Hitler promoted Paulus to field marshal. No German field marshal had ever been captured alive. The message was not subtle. Hitler expected Paulus to die rather than surrender. Paulus chose not to cooperate with that particular career tradition. The following morning, Soviet troops reached his headquarters in the basement of a department store. On January 31st, Paulus surrendered. The northern group fought for 2 more days. On February 2nd, organized German resistance in Stalingrad ended. Approximately 91,000 Axis soldiers entered Soviet captivity. Only a small fraction returned home years later. The total human cost of the wider Stalingrad campaign was staggering. Depending on which operations and categories are counted, military and civilian casualties reached into the millions. Numbers this large are difficult to understand. Each one represented a person with a family, a home, and a life beyond the battlefield. Stalingrad was a military turning point, but it was also a human catastrophe. Stalingrad was not the only turning point of World War II. The war was global, and major changes were also taking place in North Africa, the Atlantic, and the Pacific. But Stalingrad was one of the clearest signs that Nazi Germany could be defeated. An entire German field army had been destroyed. Germany and its allies had suffered enormous losses in soldiers, equipment, and morale. The Soviet Union had demonstrated that it could plan and execute massive offensive operations. From this point onward, the Red Army increasingly pushed west. The road would remain long and unimaginably costly, but the direction of the war had changed. Today, Stalingrad is called Volgograd. Memorials stand where soldiers and civilians endured one of history's most devastating battles. Stalingrad teaches us about logistics, leadership, courage, and the terrible cost of turning strategy into obsession. Maps show where armies moved. Numbers show how many people were lost. But neither can fully explain what it meant to survive inside that city. If you enjoyed this 2-part story, follow the channel for more history told through the people who lived it. And remember, never underestimate winter, supply lines, or a city that refuses to surrender.